Mine's working.
10-4. I'm good. I'll run this show. I'm good. I can look at my picture all night.
So these ones don't even have power going.
Oh, what'd you do?
Yeah, yeah.
It was unplugged a wee bit on yours.
With Marty.
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 Yeah, I'm really good with that.
Okay, we are recording. I will call the regular council evening meeting for Monday, January the 24th to order. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. 1, attend council chambers in person. Individuals who wish to attend council chambers in person may do so by registering in advance of the meeting by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca to ensure there is enough space in chambers. You can watch the meeting live or recorded on the District of Summerland YouTube channel, youtube.com District of Summerland. You may register to speak in advance, register in advance to speak during the meeting. Members of the public who wish to provide comment during the public comment opportunities found under items 8 and 15 are asked to register in advance by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca and provide the following information: your name, your civic address, and how you will be participating, whether in person, telephone, or Zoom. Further details will be provided upon registration. 4th, you can request to speak during the meeting. If you haven't registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities, time may be given, time permitting. After I have provided everyone who has pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those in council chambers and those on the conference line. The conference line can be accessed by dialing 778-907-2071, entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. Corporate officer, are there any late items? No? Okay, so if I could call for approval of the agenda. Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Holmes, all in favor? Great. And adoption of the minutes from the January 10th regular evening meeting. Councillor Van Elfen and Holmes, all in favor? Great. And on to our mayor's report. On January 14th, I attended the most recent in a series of webinars regarding the Okanagan Lake Responsibility Planning Initiative. The initiative is designed to bring silk and non-silk partners together to address the cumulative impacts threatening the long-term viability of Okanagan Lake and its ecosystems. These ecosystems and watersheds provide clean drinking water, habitat for fish and wildlife, and erosion and flood control. They also contribute to reducing the impacts of the changing climate. The webinars are led and hosted by Okanagan Nation Alliance and Okanagan Collaborative Conservation Program. Through the district's participation in the South Okanagan Similkameen Conservation Program, Summerland is part of this collaborative effort. This webinar was about how traditional ecological knowledge, referred to as tech, can provide a framework for setting strategic directions for land use planning processes and action plans. My two biggest takeaways from this webinar were a clearer understanding of tech and the Silk worldview, and how both can guide us to solutions on how to restore health to our watersheds and ultimately downstream to Okanagan Lake. Council spent the better part of January 18th and 19th on operational and capital budget discussions. The proposed property tax rate is 4% this year. Details on this proposed increase and where our tax dollars are being put to work will be provided at a virtual budget open house scheduled for February the 3rd at 4 p.m. More information on how property taxes relate to increased assessments is available in the district's February newsletter that is mailed out with your utilities invoice. And I couldn't miss this opportunity to say, did you know that the district has a tree reserve? When you sign up to receive your utility bill electronically instead of by mail, every month the cost of saved postage is redirected to the tree reserve. The money is used to purchase and plant trees. The phrase, "don't print, save a tree," takes on a whole new meaning when you consider our tree reserve. On January 18th, MLA Ashton and I took part in a teleconference with Minister Adrian Dix, Health Minister, and the CEO of Interior Health, Susan Brown. We raised the matter of the temporary closure of the Summerland lab and its impact on residents, particularly those who have challenges getting to the Penticton Regional Hospital lab. Thursday, January the 20th, I had another call from Interior Health advising that they are looking actively into a Summerland, pardon me. Thursday, January the 20th, I had another call from Interior Health advising that Interior Health is actively working on Summerland's temporary lab closure and efforts are underway to reinstate this service. I have no details to share at this time, but I'm hopeful we will hear good news in the coming days. Finally, many people in Summerland are saddened by the passing of Dick Clements. Mr. Clements was an amazing storyteller and could recite a poem or lines from a theater script or sing a song. Tom Paxton's Rambling Boy comes to mind. Dick served in the British Royal Navy during World War II before immigrating to Canada and was an active member of the Summerland Legion, often participating in flag lowering and raising ceremonies on Remembrance Day. Dick was also a close friend of George Riga, a renowned Summerland author and playwright, and participated in the opening of the George Riga Arts and Cultural Center this past October. On behalf of Council and those who have reached out to me in the last few days with their fond memories of Dick, our condolences to your family and your friends at the Legion and elsewhere. Summerland will miss your twinkling eyes, wit, and spirit. And that concludes my mayor's report. CAO Stat.
Thank you, Your Worship. On behalf of staff, I'd like to thank Council for your time over 2 very full days on January 18th and 19th to engage the general and capital budget preparations. The clear direction from Council on many areas gives staff the clarity we need to see a lot of progress in 2022. A number of large capital projects are anticipated, from the rebuild of Giants Head Road with associated water separation to the replacement of a large portion of water main at Canyon View Road, and of course the associated repaving there. We also will be building our new organics processing facility at the landfill, mostly funded by grant funding. In terms of operations, we look forward to implementing our new development services software system, which will improve customer service and our own internal file management. The Memorial Park Playground will be replaced this spring and the downtown neighborhood plan finalized. The creation of a new waterfront master plan, the updating of many bylaws, and of course, a possible substantive new shift in the way we regulate short-term accommodation in the district. It's going to be a busy year, and we're excited about the progress that will be made in 2022. The pothole situation is very bad this year. We want to reassure council and the public, we are aware of this. The weather we are currently experiencing is unfortunately a recipe for potholes. Of course, the ideal solution for potholes is to cut out the broken asphalt, replace the base gravels, and reseal the road with hot mix asphalt. We've had a number of comments from the public requesting this type of road treatment right now. Unfortunately, this time of year, hot mix asphalt is unavailable, so we need to turn to cold mix asphalt. We are carefully using our current stock of cold mix asphalt on the worst potholes, and given the current demand for cold mix everywhere, it is causing supply shortages, and those will remain in effect until we can obtain more. In the meantime, where a larger hole appears, we are attempting to mark it with a cone or a sign until we're able to repair that pothole. Depending on weather and the year, our road repair efforts ramp up. And the time of year our road efforts ramp up are typically April and May, at which time weather allows us to make a lot of progress quickly. Residents can report a pothole by calling Public Works Office at 250-494-0431 or send an email to worksandinfrastructure@summerland.ca. Fortis continues their substation rebuild that's happening on Giants Head Road near Hilborn Street. They are expanding the substation footprint to about double the size and reconfiguring the transmission system, which will ultimately end up with Summerland having a refurbished transformer servicing us at this location. Right now, we service about a quarter of our customers from this substation, and Fortis BC will have some scheduled community-wide outages this year to complete the work. Finally, I wanted to share the good news that the funder has reviewed our reapplication for scope change on our solar project, and the technical review committee has confirmed that this is a minor scope change, which allows us to retain all the allocated grant funds and proceed with the project. We are working hard to prepare the request for proposals for the project, which will be released in the coming weeks. And that's my report. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Council, any questions of either of our reports? Okay. So we'll go on to the business items for tonight. No, sorry, public comment opportunity. Okay. There are none, so development reports 9.1, development variance permit 5007 Monroe Avenue, DVP 21-029, and Joanne is going to be speaking to this.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just going to share my screen. So the district received an application for a development variance permit for 5007 Monroe Avenue. And this application is seeking to reduce the areable land requirement for an additional dwelling for farm help from 2 hectares to 1.95 hectares. There's an existing house on the property, and the applicant has submitted a site plan proposing an additional dwelling for farm help to be located between the existing house and Monroe Avenue. So the area shown here. This property is located entirely within the agricultural land reserve, and starting at the end of last year, the ALC is now allowing for additional dwellings up to 90 square meters in size for properties that are less than 40 hectares to have one principal residence that meets the regulation, and in addition to that, have another dwelling that is 90 square meters. So this means that the ALC does not require an application for the additional dwelling in this case, as long as the dwelling has a floor area of 90 square meters or less. This property is designated as agricultural in the OCP, and in general, the official community plan seeks to support agricultural activities on agricultural lands, and it also seeks to maintain the integrity of the ALR and support the economic base of the agricultural community. It also seeks to support confining residential development within agricultural lands. And this application is seen as one where the residential use is intended to support the farm and to be used as a farm residence. And this is compatible with the agricultural policies and objectives in the OCP. So this proposal is for an additional dwelling for farm help. So just in contrast to temporary farm worker accommodation, an additional dwelling for farm help is more permanent, and it can be a house that is meant to accommodate full-time permanent farm workers for the property, and it can take on different forms, including a single detached dwelling. So that's the intention here, would be to have a permanent house, and the specific details of that single detached dwelling would be reviewed at a later stage when it came in for building permit. The applicant has indicated that it will be 90 square meters or less to be consistent with the ALR regulations. As you can see on the site plan, the proposed dwelling is clustered near the existing buildings and driveway on the property. So it plans to share a driveway with the existing house and be accessed from Monroe. And as you can see in red is the proposed additional dwelling for farm help between Monroe and the existing house. So the property is zoned A1 agricultural small acreage, and this is a permitted use under that zone. There are specific use requirements under the zoning. So one of those specific use requirements is to have a lot area where there's 2 hectares or more of arable land. Arable land being land that's can be farmed. So that's where we're seeking that the variance is for that provision. It also requires farm designation, and this property is assessed as a farm. And there are gross floor area calculations in our bylaw that are a little bit larger than what's required without ALC approval. And there's additional maximums to number of bedrooms, height, basements, and so on, to provide more guidance in terms of what that house can look like. So there's some more restrictions within the bylaw. And in addition to that, one of the zoning requirements is to require a restrictive covenant, so that, to ensure that the dwelling is only used for farm help. So we did send this application out internally. So as I mentioned, a building permit will be required, and BC building code will need to be met. Our fire department commented that it is outside of the 10-minute response time, and they will require clear access for firefighting purposes. And with dwellings that are separate, they require separate curbside collection for each of those units. So environmental services would have multiple collection carts to be picked up at this location. This application was also reviewed by the Agricultural Advisory Committee, and the AAC was generally supportive of the application. They did have a couple of questions about the restrictive covenant and whether that would be a requirement in the future. They also had comments about if we were to change the restrictive covenant requirement, how that would be handled in relation to short-term rentals. And just a general comment and concern about the marshy conditions and high water table known to be in that particular area, and septic fields potentially conflicting with that. After discussion, the AAC did resolve to support this application to reduce the arable land required and allow for the additional dwelling for farm help. So this DVP is generally seen as meeting the intent of the zoning regulations. And the proposed dwelling is also seen as supporting the agricultural use of the property. It's also acknowledged that this proposal aligns with the ALC's recently amended regulations to increase residential flexibility within the ALR. And I further acknowledge that the district is in the process of reviewing our secondary dwelling regulations. And part of this process will be evaluating regulations as they apply to additional dwelling in the agricultural A1 and A2 zones, where the district is being more limiting than the ALC in terms of requirements for additional dwellings. So staff is supportive of this application as it's seen to meet the general intent of the bylaw. It would help support housing to support a farm operation, and it aligns with the direction of the ALC to allow for more residential flexibility. So as such, it is recommended that council authorizes the issuance of the DVP to vary the minimum lot area of arable land from 2 hectares to 1.5 hectares as proposed. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Joanne. Council questions? Councillor Patton and Councillor Barkle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To our planner. So can you tell me, with the new implemented ALC regulations that are coming forward for the additional dwellings, will there be a requirement within those regulations for a restrictive covenant?
Not from the ALC. As it stands, our zoning bylaw requires a restrictive covenant for an additional dwelling for farm help.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Van Elfen. Oh, sorry, Councillor Barkle and then Van Elfen.
Queue jumper. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of questions about the farm home plate and this one in general. It says it's going to be 25% of the farm home plate. What is the size of the farm home plate? And how is that determined?
Yeah, so the size of the farm home plate under our regulations is increased to 1,500 square meters when you have an additional dwelling on the property. If there was one dwelling on the property, it's 750 square meters. And the practical application of the farm home plate is really taking the percentage of that total area and determining whether the buildings that are generally clustered together are under that percentage. In terms of establishing the exact location of the farm home plate, our bylaw is fairly lenient in terms of how that's defined.
So none of the farm buildings, equipment sheds and stuff would be included in the farm home plate, would they?
No, the lot coverage is for the residential buildings.
Only residential of the farm. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Now, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So question through our planner. You just stated that we require a restricted covenant for farm workers accommodation, because we don't have the bylaw yet for secondary homes. And when we do get the bylaw for secondary homes, they shouldn't have to require a restricted covenant. And then if this is an application for a farm help building, I didn't see anything in here about kitchens. Because I know a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we had this same discussion about cooking facilities aren't allowed in a farm help building, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't, I just think this whole restricted covenant is just an added cost to the landowner that's not necessarily necessary. And I think it's something we need to address in the very near future, maybe when we do the new ALC rulings. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I have a question. Oh, please respond, Brad.
Yeah, I can respond to that. The current bylaw we have has two sections within it. One for temporary farm worker accommodation, which we did talk about at our last meeting. And then we have another section called for an additional dwelling for farm help. So there's two separate sections. One is a permanent residential building. The other one is a temporary farm worker accommodation, which has a number of units or bedrooms within there for temporary farm workers. So they are a little different. One's permanent, one's temporary. However, they both require the restricted covenant, and I think, Councillor, your comments are prudent, and we are going to be reviewing this as part of the secondary dwelling regulation review that in light of the ALC's changes here in the near future.
I have a couple of questions. One of them has already been answered. Thank you, Councillor Barkwell, to ask the question about the home plate. I can't tell. I can see clearly that maybe there's fruit trees or something being grown on the property. What is being grown on the west side? So the opposite side of the existing house from where the proposed farm worker housing.
Apples, Madam Mayor.
Apples in both areas?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. They just look so different on the overhead.
Yeah, I think it's
Image.
like a high density.
Oh, so different style of growing.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So the reason I was asking that question is because I wanted to, ensure that the building was in a position where it was causing the least impact to a land that's already being farmed. And certainly the high density is a much better way to get a return on your acreage. So regarding the restrictive covenant, what are the reasons for the restrictive covenant? I think I have some ideas, but I want to throw that out there so that I can get clarification on that, or confirmation, I guess.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, if I may answer that one. So this has been a historical use in a lot of Okanagan regional bylaws of placing a restricted covenant on title to ensure that the dwelling or even temporary farm worker accommodation was going to be used for the intended purpose of an agricultural use or a dwelling for farm worker purposes. There was a risk in the past that someone would indicate that they would be using this dwelling for farm worker purposes, but then converted to a rental suite, as an example, which was contrary to the ALC's regulations. Now, all of that has changed, though, with the ALC's change of approach of providing more leniency to allow for secondary suites, including rental suites, on agricultural properties. So it is something that it's kind of a holdover from previous years within our zoning bylaw, but something we need to address within our zoning bylaw.
Okay, great. Another question about the farm plate. Joanne, you mentioned that our bylaw is fairly lenient. I think that's how you described it, on how the farm plate is determined. Can you, I wrote down the 1,500 square meters size when you're looking at a second even temporary or permanent resident on the property. Is the 1,500 square meters, is that not necessarily 1,500 like in a contiguous area, or can it be broken up into various areas?
Yeah, so the intention of the farm home plate is to cluster residential uses to one area. And what I was referring to in terms of how that area was determined, is kind of, it's lenient because under the definition of what the farm home plate is, it's basically the portion of the lot that includes the farm residence and then any of the related buildings located in proximity, like accessory buildings for that residential use that are located in proximity to that residence. So the intention is for them to be clustered within the same area. But unlike other zoning bylaws, there aren't any specifications in terms of, how close it has to be to the road, for example, or if you were, or what the dimensions are in terms of like it could be a circle or a square, for example, and that would cover a different area with a different calculation. So as we've tried to apply the bylaw as things came in, essentially as long as it's within the same general area and it's meeting that lot coverage calculation, that has been interpreted as meeting the farm home plate regulation.
Good, thank you for that. Councillor Van Elfen and then Barkle.
I was just going to ask if you would like the resolution brought to the table, Madam Mayor.
Okay, I'll just go to Councillor Barkle first in case he has a question.
Yes, it is I guess, a question. But it has a bit of a preamble. I'm thinking more about what Councillor Patton and Van Alpen have brought up about the changes coming on secondary residences on farm property. And if we're quite sure that we're going to allow secondary residences that don't have a covenant that they have to be used for farm help, perhaps we should consider that we don't require it for this one as well. I'm just thinking somewhere down the road, how much would it cost to, and how much trouble for both the district and the landowner would it be to go and have that covenant removed? Is there, any sort of overwhelming reason that we should require that covenant on this particular property, other than the fact that we haven't fully considered and discussed and put in a new policy yet?
So your question is there any, particular reason why we should require this other than the policy? Yeah. Joanne or Brad?
Yes, if I may.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so that was something that I did think about when this application came forward. So the applicant is aware that we are intending to do a review of our policies, but for timing reasons, they wanted to move forward with this variance and not wait for the outcome of that other process. So in terms of right now, as it stands, the zoning bylaw does allow or require that restrictive covenant. And at this point in time, I believe that one of the intentions is to review this and become more lenient, but I can't really promise the outcome as to what that would be and whether or not there would or would not be restrictive covenants in any circumstance as an outcome of that review. But I will say that we won't be requiring the restrictive covenant to be registered until the building permit stage. So there is a little bit of lead time between this variance and when they might require their building permit, where they can wait and see what the outcome of our review process is.
Okay, I'll go to Brad first, and then Councillor Van Elfen is next, and then Barkle.
Yeah, just to add on to what Joanne has indicated, which all of what she stated is correct, we are planning to incorporate this as part of our review. If council chooses tonight that they do not want to require the restrictive covenant, they can add it to this variance approval as an additional condition of the approval to vary that section of the zoning bylaw, and we can do that as well.
Okay. Councillor Van Elfen and then Barkle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And that makes perfect sense to me. And if all of a sudden at this table it didn't go forward, we can still require that applicant to, no? Okay, no, fair enough. I'm good with what you suggested.
Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just thinking, there are only certain things that we can vary, such as our bylaw for lot sizes and stuff. Is removing the requirement for a covenant something that we can actually legally do?
Yes,
All
through,
right.
through the worship to Councillor Barkwell. Yeah,
Okay.
that would be something you could do.
Okay, are you ready to bring forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That council authorize issuance of development variance permit DVP 21-029 for property located at 5007 Monroe Avenue, legally described as Lot A, District Lot 2196, Soyuz Division Yale, District Plan KAP 49057, and that the variance to the following sections of the zoning bylaw 2000-450 be granted. Additional dwelling for farm help section 7.12.1 to vary the minimum lot area of arable land from 2 hectares to 1.95 hectares proposed, and that we waive the need for a restricted covenant.
You're seconding, Councillor Barkwell? Okay, further discussion on this? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I truly do agree with Councillor Barkwell and Van Elpen. So we go for a restricted covenant, and the only person that can take that restrictive covenant off is the district of Summerland. So there's a cost borne by the applicant to put the restrictive covenant on. Now, if we do go forward where as our planner so eloquently said, that there would be residential flexibility in ALC with not having to that the housing opportunity would be open where no restrictive, then this homeowner then could apply to the district to have that covenant removed at, again, another cost. And so I think, I feel that moving this way is a total, is good on the district for recognizing this need that these covenants are no longer required. And I think it's a great move. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to, say thank you to our Director of Planning for clarification on that. I think it's a great move on the district's part, as Councillor Patton just stated. There's costs incurred to remove it and to put it on. So I really appreciate the clarity this evening. Thank you.
Yes, and the proponent said, no, I don't really want to wait, so I'll take my chances on this. And I think this is a good way to address that as well. It certainly makes sense to me. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. So it carries unanimously. Now on to item 9.2, development variance permit for 6108 Austin Street, DVP 21-031. And Alex looks like he's getting ready to go for us.
Yeah, thank you. Let me just get my screen shared here. Alrighty. So the district has received an application for variance at 6108 Austin Street. The subject property is a single-family residential lot in the lower town, lower town neighborhood of Summerland. The property owner is proposing to facilitate a panhandle subdivision of the lot to create a new additional single-family residential lot. So back in 2017, a subdivision application was received, and a preliminary layout approval PLA was issued for a similar subdivision proposal, as you can see here on screen. During this time, the proponent executed several requirements of that PLA, including fully servicing to both of the proposed lots. However, the final subdivision was not achieved at that time, and the application expired and was abandoned in August of 2018. So in 2021, recently here, the proponent resubmitted the subdivision application in the hopes of finalizing the original subdivision proposal. So within the original preliminary layout approval that was prepared for the subdivision, there was a requirement listed that the existing single detached house on site must be removed or altered such that it would comply with the District of Summerland zoning bylaw. The existing house did not comply with the required 1.5 meter interior side setback to the property line. At this time, the carport and deck structure projected into the proposed panhandle portion of the subdivision. So works were not conducted to remedy the situation immediately. However, in April of 2020, the proponent did remove the carport and significantly decrease the size of the deck in an effort to reduce the proposed variance to allow for the panhandle subdivision. When the proponent submitted a new application for subdivision in 2021, the survey provided showed that the removal works on the carport and deck still did not satisfy the zoning bylaw side yard setback requirement of 1.5 meters. As shown on the survey plan, the deck projects to within 0.6 meters of the proposed new panhandle property line. Upon issuance of the revised PLA, the requirement was included under the zoning section stating that the structure must be removed or brought into compliance through the issuance of a development variance permit. The proponent, in response to this requirement, submitted an application for a development variance permit to allow the deck and enclosed storage structure to project to within 0.6 meters of the new property line. So the property in the OCP future land use designation is designated as low density residential, and it is zoned RSD1 residential medium lot, as all neighboring lots in the surrounding neighborhood are. So during the internal referral for this variance, the building department did note that the subject property is located outside of the 10-minute fire response area, and therefore the proposed 2.1 meter setback for the foundation of the main house is reduced to 1.05 meters by the BC Building Code. So BC Building Code dictates that any exposed building face that is less than 1.2 meters from the property line must have zero unprotected openings must have zero unprotected openings, and the exposing building face and exterior walls shall have fire resistance rating of not less than 45 minutes. Cladding shall be metal and or non-combustible. As a result, if the variance is approved, the existing house would need to be brought into compliance with the BC Building Code through the issuance of a building permit. The proponent's variance rationale letter states that for safety reasons, the entire deck could not be removed to comply with a 1.5 meter setback requirement. In order to ensure that a secondary egress route for the second floor suite could be maintained, and that so the bottom floor suite entrance was provided a covered breezeway, a small portion of deck on the east side of the home is proposed to remain in place. So while reducing setbacks on residential properties is seldom encouraged, as it can disrupt from the form and character of a neighborhood, the variance proposed is small and is not anticipated to negatively impact the streetscape or have severe impacts to any adjacent neighboring lots. The proposed setback variance will allow an attached deck to remain in place adjacent to a future panhandle driveway, and there would be no risk of that panhandle driveway being further developed onto with a building up, there's no chance that the panhandle driveway will be developed with any buildings or structures. Further, the issuance of this variance would ensure secondary egress is maintained for the upper floor suite, enhancing the overall safety of the existing units. It should also be noted that the unenclosed decks may project into a required setback, provided that such projections do not exceed 0.6 meters in the case of an interior side setback. So as such, decks are typically allowed to project to within 0.9 meters of the property line in a 1.5 meter setback. And the request in this case is to project to within 0.6, so only 0.3 meters more than what is permitted under our zoning bylaw. So as such, staff are recommending approval of the proposed side setback variance. However, given the comments from the building department, staff is also recommending that a condition of the proposed variance permit would include the issuance of a building permit to confirm BC Building Code spatial separation requirements. Thank you very much.
Questions, council? Okay, I don't see any. Councillor Van Elfen.
Put the recommendation on the table, Madam Mayor.
Please.
The council authorize issuance of development variance permit DVP 21-031 for properties located at 6108 Austin Street, legally described as Lot 11, District Lot 455, Osoyoos Division Yale District Plan KAP 18857, and that the variance to the following sections of zoning bylaw 2000-450 be granted. Side interior setback section 10.1.6A3 to vary the minimum side interior yard setback from 1.5 meters to 0.6 meters proposed.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Pat. Any further discussion or comment on this? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To our Director of Development Services, for the building permit to be enacted on this, is it now that we've gone through our, they will be required to get one? Okay, thank you so much.
Any other questions, or Councillor Van Elfen?
Just for clarification, I think I said 3, but I guess it's I. Sorry.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? And none opposed. That carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
On to 10.1, site-specific text amendment, 11510 Blair Street, and this is a bylaw, site-specific zoning bylaw for adoption. Alex, I think you're up for this one too.
Yeah, so there's no presentation for this item, but I'm
Okay.
happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Okay, it's just for adoption. Are there any questions? Okay, if I could have someone bring forward, well, we know it's for adoption, but if I could have someone read the motion, please. Councillor Van Elfen.
That zoning bylaw amendment 11510 Blair Street, bylaw number 2021-022 be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Van Elfen. Seconded by Councillor Traynor. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Nothing coming up from Committee of the Whole or closed, so we'll go on to the first of 4 notices of motion. I don't think that Councillor Carlson has joined us yet. Is that correct? She's not here yet. Okay. So we will go on to Councillor Holmes, and I will pass this directly to, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On Councillor Carlson's notice of motion, can anyone else speak on it? Or?
We don't really have a process or procedure for that. So, I mean, Councillor Carlson isn't here to speak to the intent of the motion. So we could discuss it, or I would ask that we bring forward a motion to postpone it to the 14th.
Oh, Councillor Trainer.
She said she's still not feeling well. If my notice of motion comes up, I have no problem letting it go ahead without me. So she said someone can speak to it or we can save it, whatever we want.
Does that work for you legislatively? Okay, great. Councillor Van Alphen, would you like to do that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know, I'm pretty sure I know Councillor Carlson's intent, and I don't want to speak on her behalf, but my feelings are this bylaw restriction that does not allow a kitchen in a temporary farm workers accommodation is something that we need to change. And I think that was Councillor Carlson's intent. I sure hope so. But that's my feeling on this, that we're allowing temporary farm workers accommodations on farmland to accommodate foreign farm workers, but we don't give them any area, to cook, which makes no sense. I know the intent of this is when the foreign farm workers go home, I think there's a fear that the farmer's just going to rent it out to Joe Blow and maybe never have foreign farm workers again. But I think the kitchen is an absolute must. I think, I don't know about the rules and regulations when it comes to temporary farm workers accommodations. I do know the ordinary farm workers accommodations must have cooking facilities in them, and they must be equipped and they're inspected on a yearly basis. And inspected to the point, like it has to have X amount of cutlery, X amount of cups, X amount of bedding, and all of that. So I think that we're not treating the foreign farm workers in the same respect is kind of ludicrous, in my opinion. I think a kitchen is just a necessity.
And therefore, I would like to bring a motion that states.
Therefore, I would like to bring a motion that states that temporary farm workers accommodation include kitchens.
That council directs staff.
The council directs staff to do
amend the zoning bylaw regulations. I'm just reading what Councillor
okay.
Carlson has put forward.
I apologize, Madam Mayor. I'll bring that up. That council directs staff to amend the zoning bylaw regulations to allow communal kitchens, facilities, and common areas to be built in temporary farm workers accommodations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you bearing with me. You're a good guy there, Councillor Van Alphen.
I appreciate the guidance. Thank you.
Seconder, Councillor Trainer. Okay, further discussion on this? Councillor Van Alphen.
Just a comment. I want to thank Councillor Carlson for bringing this as a notice of motion and to bring it to light. I think it's something that's way past due, and I appreciate her doing so. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I do agree, but I believe that this has done a great service for our domestic farm workers, never mind just our foreign farm workers that do have the federal government to rely on for the types of accommodations that are supplied. But I do not believe that our domestic farm workers have that same privilege. So this will actually level the playing field for them. So thank you.
Yes, that's a good point, Councillor Patton. Any further discussion? All in favor? And none opposed. That carries unanimously. And the second of our notices of motions comes from Councillor Holmes.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, our planner had his hand up for a moment. I apologize.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, also inform council how we'll follow this direction in terms of implementation of it. We are going to be doing an annual zoning bylaw update for administrative changes to our zoning bylaw. So this is something easy that we'll be able to capture within that review, and we'll be bringing forward a meeting upcoming fairly quickly back to council. Just wanted to point that out.
That's really great. I know that Councillor Carlson was talking about you have to have this before you can apply for that, but you can't apply for this until you have that. So that would take care of that, I would think. Okay, now Councillor Holmes. Thank you, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you. Should I put the motion on the table and then discuss, or?
Yeah, whatever you'd like.
Okay, I'll move that council direct staff to amend the sign bylaw to not allow the placement of election campaign signs along Main Street and along Victoria Road between Jubilee Road and Warden Street.
Seconder, Councillor Trainer. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot more to say than what I put in my in the report there, but just make it clear that I'm not at all suggesting what we do like they have in Penticton, where you only have designated areas for signs. It's more of we put a lot of effort into making sure our downtown looks really nice year round, and to keep that the way it's intended to look, and not have any politicians coming around sticking their signs and lanterns and ruining all those efforts. Not mentioning any names, Councillor Van Elfen. Thanks.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I take great offense to that. No, I was going to see if Councillor Holmes would entertain a friendly amendment, including Rosedale Avenue from Julia to Main Street. So we'd have Victoria, Main Street, Jubilee, Rosedale. Am I correct? Is people following me here?
I'm following you. What do you think, Councillor Holmes?
Sorry, Rosedale to Julia, or Jubilee?
Main Street, so Rosedale from Main Street to Jubilee included in your, so that, we wouldn't have them in the roundabout at Jubilee, correct? And you wouldn't have them in the planters down the center of the road on Rosedale, like there's boulevards, and you wouldn't have them in front of the high school area. I don't know, just a thought.
I don't believe, I believe our sign law doesn't allow signs in the boulevards already, like in the middle of the roads anyway, already. So for down Rosedale, you couldn't stick them in the middle. You can't stick them in the middle of a roundabout either. I don't believe, I think that's already in there. Around the perimeter of the roundabout at Jubilee, I don't know, personally, I don't think that's a big deal if there's a sign there or not, but that's just my opinion.
I just have a question for you, Councillor Van Elfen. When you were talking about the boulevards, were you talking about the grassed area between, next to the road, between the sidewalk and or were you talking about the median in between lanes?
The medium in between.
Okay, good. Okay. So you would like to keep the resolution as you've put it forward? Okay. Any further discussion? Councillor Barkwell.
Would this, what would happen if somebody did like, happened once before where there was a downtown office for a candidate and they have signs in their window? Does it preclude signs in a store window?
I don't think we have any control over that. I think it's only public property that we have control over, so. The corporate officer could probably confirm that.
She is by nodding of her head. Any further? Oh, Graham, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just point out the obvious to council on this, that whatever areas we put into the no-go sort of category do add staff time for compliance perspective, pulling signs and dealing with those. See the value in the motion for all the reasons mentioned, just making sure the council's tracking. The bigger we make the areas or the no-go zones, the more staff time it can take.
perhaps there could be clear guidance as the process that begins before candidates put in their papers that, yes, these are the areas you don't put your signs. Councillor Councillor Patton and then Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I do believe in the bylaw, it states that on the evenings or I believe it's the early voting nights. Yes, that the downtown core could not have it. You had to go and remove your signs during that period. Then you could put them back in the next day, I believe, from the voting stations in the which. So if it was pretty much the whole downtown core last year from the high school, right? So, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As our comments from our CEO, I agree with you, Madam Mayor. There's the day that generally the candidates meet and they're told what order they're going to be on the ballot. I mean, that's an opportune time to tell people what goes and what doesn't go when it comes to election signs. But I support Councillor Holmes' notice of motion.
Kendra, would you like to speak to this at all, seeing as how you're our Chief Elections Officer?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So yeah, usually before we head into nomination period, there's lots of times there's like a pre-candidate session so that those that are interested in submitting nomination papers can get more information about what it means, as well as in the nomination packages. Usually you would include all this type of information, like election campaign financing, signed bylaws. So that information will be provided well in advance to those that are interested in submitting nomination packages or papers.
Right. Thank you, Kendra. Councillor Barkle.
I support this motion. My only doubts about it is that whether it goes as far as we could. I was kind of liking Councillor Van Elfen's suggestion, and then you start thinking, well, what about Kelly Avenue? What about Horton Street? So where do you draw the line? So I think this is great for this year, but it's not out of the question that future years that councils may want to change it, restrict it even further.
Okay, I will call the question. All in favor? And none opposed. That's unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Next notice of motion is mine, that Mayor Boot be nominated for first vice president for the Southern Interior Local Government Association executive for the 2022-2023 year term. Seconder, Councillor Traynor, thank you. This will be my, if I am elected, this will be my second year as the first vice president. And it's my 6th year of serving on the SILGA board. The background just shows the Constitution and the offices that are to be filled. There was a request by the head of the nominating committee to have a resolution from councils, and that's why I have brought this motion forward tonight. So if there's any questions or further discussion. Okay, all in favor? Thank you for your support, Council. And now to the fourth one. I think this is the first meeting we've had 4 notices of motion. And all brought forward the way that they should be brought forward. So I will go to you, Councillor Traynor.
Thank you. Would you like, I guess, should I read out the motion first or?
Yeah, and we'll get it on the floor and then we can discuss.
I'll read. Okay. So I would like to bring forward a motion that council consider that $25,000 be allocated from the Asset Management Reserve to the capital budget for the purchase of 2 portable water fill stations and 2 portable shade tents, and that council direct staff to research options for a permanent water fill station in the Memorial Park concept plan.
Seconder, Councillor Holmes.
So I'll just read my background, just, I know you guys probably could have read it, but I'll just read it in case anybody's going to watch this. So last summer, BC experienced an unprecedented multi-day heat dome weather event with record-breaking temperatures that reached 45 degrees Celsius in Summerland. Close to 600 deaths were attributed to this event across the province. As the impacts of climate change continue to increase, municipalities are looking at ways to reduce their carbon emissions, adapt to a changing climate, and help their citizens cope during these challenging times. In the June 2021 heat dome, several residents in Summerland asked what the district was doing to provide assistance to citizens, including a suggestion to establish drinking water stations around town. Dehydration and heat stroke can affect anyone at any age during hot weather. Providing access to drinking water in public areas can help reduce the risk of these heat-related illnesses. Water stations are an eco-friendly alternative to providing single-use bottled water, which generates large amounts of waste. An allocation of $25,000 would cover the purchase of 2 portable water stations where people can fill up their water bottles, as well as 2 10-by-10 shade tents that can be deployed during extreme heat events or perhaps extended periods of warmer weather during the summer. Recommended locations are downtown and lower town. Additionally, these units may be used for events including the Giants Head Run held during Action Fest. The purchase of these units could be funded through the Asset Management Reserve Fund, which is why I'm bringing this forward now, because we had budget discussions last week. And then just as an additional, it was recommended to me that staff explore the installation of a permanent water filling station in Memorial Park in the redesign so that people could have easy access to drinking water. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't understand what you need a water filling station for. Isn't that what you call a tap? I mean, without being facetious, I just don't, you're going to have to explain something for me here before I can make a decision here.
Well, it would be a station that would be set up downtown so that people during these heat, like extreme heat events, they could get water if they needed it.
But doesn't everybody already have access to water in their houses and the neighbor's sprinkler or whatever I mean, I don't see the need here. Perhaps you could explain the need.
It was just if people were downtown or in lower towns, residents, if they were out walking or tourists and they needed water during this extreme event, that they would be able to get it at a place instead of going into a business or going in to buy it.
Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I see the purpose behind this. I totally agree with you. 25 grand, I'm concerned. But the need for some, public water filling stations, I agree with you 100%. I'd like staff to be able to come back and say, hey, this is what it's going to cost. But I don't disagree with you. And for the tents, I'd like to just ask our CEO to check with our Director of Utilities. It was only 3 years ago, we just purchased a $10,000 tent that was a warm-up tent for light up. And if it was a warm-up tent for light up at the tune of 10 grand, it could be a cooling tent too. You know what I mean? Like it could be used in a heat, unprecedented heat wave like we had last year. You could set up that tent in Memorial Park for say, and give people some shade. But I don't disagree with this. It's just the dollar amount concerns me. And I think, and with the Memorial Park Master Plan, I agree 100%. There should be, I'm hoping permanent washrooms 12 months a year plus somewhere to fill water bottles. And the whole idea, as Councillor Traynor said, it's really quick to walk into 7-Eleven and purchase a bottle of water. But we all know what happens to where the plastic goes after. So it's a good idea. It has lots of value, I think.
Councillor Trainer and then Councillor Barkle.
Yeah, I'm just bringing this forward because, again, I got asked several times last summer what we were doing, and there was a lot of discussion on social media, and everything is always more expensive than you think. And the $25,000 actually came from my discussions with the CAO and with our Director of Public Works. He costed out a bunch of machines, and they're about $10,000 each. I also took this idea from the city of Penticton. They did this in their downtown core during the heat wave. So I just thought it was something that we could do to help people who are downtown who need water, or at Lower Town. And you know, I think that we're going to be seeing more of these events going on. So it's just one thing that we can do, and yeah.
Councillor Barkle.
I agree that it seems quite likely we'll have heat domes again and such, but and I like what Councillor Van Alphen said, or maybe it was Councillor Trainer, was, you know, we need perhaps more fountains. You know, if they're not in the downtown area, perhaps close by, another fountain would serve a similar purpose. I think a permanent installation. What I would prefer to see is staff come, if we just put the question to staff, what are some things that council could do in order to provide cooling and water in during these events, and come back to council with some options and some pricing. You know, a shade tent, I mean, I think I'd rather sit under a tree in Memorial Park. It just isn't adding up for me. $25,000 for this. You know, sure, people ask, what are we doing? But didn't the Penticton, or was it Summerland, make the arenas available for a cool place to go, and nobody came, and they ended up shutting it down, if I remember? Maybe Councillor Van Alphen looks like he remembers. But anyhow, I'd rather be presented with options and prices than to go ahead and say we're going to do this. So I'll be voting against this.
Okay, I'd like to go back to Councillor Trainer first. Did you want to respond to that, and then to Councillor Van Alphen? And then I have a question for you too.
No, I don't think I have anything to respond to that.
Councillor Van Alphen.
I think the food bank opened their doors after a day or two of this unprecedented heat wave to give some people some relief. It's not, you know, sure, I have access to a garden hose at my, you know, or a tap at my home, but not everybody downtown, you know, possibly does. And, you know, I'm not knocking the idea. I just think it's, the dollars kind of baffle me, but that's, you know, I'd like just to see staff come back with a more accurate number possibly, but that's all. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
My question, Councillor Trainer, is I thought that last year when we had talked about this, that there was, that you brought up some consideration for misters. Have you kind of nixed that idea, or what's the situation with that?
Okay, I just want to quickly clarify something about the shade tent. So the shade tents are just basically like 10 by 10s, which we thought in my discussions with the CAO could go over they're not, you know, elaborate tents. They would just go over these so that while people are filling up their bottle, they be in shade. So that's just a comment on the shade tents. Maybe if our CAO could help me on this one in terms of the misting stations, because I think staff have already actually made those. So those will be out next summer.
Oh, I think I remember that. CAO staff.
Yeah, that's correct, Your Worship. Through Councillor Trainer, the staff, Public Works fabricated some misting hardware that we can utilize in the future for these kinds of events. And the only other thing I'll say in terms of Councillor Trainer's motion, these units are of a commercial grade. They're robust. They're very mobile. They have a motion sensor to fill the bottles, so there's no touching, sort of in our world of COVID pandemics and other things. And in conversation with some of the senior staff in the organization, the transcendent value for other types of events is there, and we believe it would be something that would be rolled out for events where there's lots of people present. Could be hot days, hot time, kids needing water, that sort of thing. And at least in the interim until we this idea about searching out options for the downtown plan and relating to Memorial Park, where something like this could be made more permanent.
Okay, thank you for the reminder on the misters. I had already forgotten about that. I have one question about the stations that we see here, and then Councillor Patton, and then Councillor Barkwell again. So my question on these, they do look commercial grade, and I appreciate the no-touch way of filling. My question is, would this require staff resources to, I guess, monitor and refill the unit with whatever supply of water they use?
Thanks for your question, Madam Mayor. It's my understanding that, in the spec sheet that was circulated, the side view shows a water bottle in there, which is probably the impetus of your question. But it's my understanding that that's if you're wanting to use the purified water from a water bottle. There's also a 3/4 inch connection with filtration option if you want to hook up to a pressurized line. But I'd have to double check some of those things with our Director of Public Works, but I believe that's how it was explained to me. So all that to say, once it's actually hooked up and moved on site, it'd be very low impact in terms of staff effort.
That's great to hear. Thank you. Councillor Patton, and then Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do like the concept. My question was the same as what is staff time going to be like? So if and it does say here that it's a fill connection is a 3/4 inch, right? So once that is tied in, and I get that it wouldn't be something that staff would pick up every night and take back to the yards, but the tent would still be. So I guess my question being then is that we still would be looking at staff time on a daily basis, removing that 10 by 10 tent and storing it somewhere and then putting it up, because I think that we all know that it would last maybe a couple nights on its own and then it would find a new home very quickly. Anyway, thank you.
Those do come up and are set up and taken down in probably 5 minutes at either side. If they're in the Memorial Park, they probably could be stored in the Horseshoe Club building. Councillor Barkwell.
Yes, I would also, two things, Madam Mayor, thank you. I'd like to point out that there's another place in Summerland that is selling bottled water or selling water, filtered water. And so we would be giving away water and stealing all of their business with. And secondly, we don't know where these would go. It's not I really like the idea of staff coming back. I mean, I like the misters, great. And with the options, it's really just an expansion of Councillor Trainer's idea. We it's a good idea. So, but let's get the options and consider the options and the prices of them and the locations and such, and do that instead of arbitrarily without any sort of research into things and considerations. Say we're going to spend $25,000 for water fill stations and some shades. I just like to carry the idea a little further.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this. So I think when we come to vote, I'd ask if we could split it out, because for the number 2 part, definitely, I think, let's figure out we want some long-term solution to be able to have a filling station. The short term, I had a bit of a shock at the price as well of these things, and I had questions about vandalism and whatnot. I guess what I'm struggling for is, are we thinking more of for emergency situations, like if there's a heat dome, or is it more for like special events? And in which case would there be an opportunity to rent them out to community groups, for example, if they're running a tournament or something like that? I don't know. But so I guess I'm kind of leaning towards what Councillor Barkwell is saying, that let's, I guess I just like to, have a better identification of what the needs are and how much we'd use it, and maybe one is enough rather than two, and that sort of thing.
Marion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think all good points from Councillor Holmes. The only thing I would say is, regardless of where council lands with this, if there was a now or in the future purchase of a device like this, we'd absolutely come up with a operational policy on our use of said device in terms of, when we would bring it out in an emergency situation, when it can be utilized for events, on what request process, and if we would have a rental approach to it as well. So certainly that's on our mind. We just wanted to wait and see what council's overall position was on the asset purchase before we proceeded with any of that.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, and a question for, I don't know, either Councillor Trainer or the CIO, I guess. Are the shade tents absolutely necessary? I mean, can't you just put it somewhere where shade tent isn't required?
Absolutely, for sure. I wasn't envisioning some big expensive shade tent. It was just like a kind of like a canopy like you get at the farmer's market to put over top of it. That's all. I mean, the price is higher than I thought. I had no idea how much these cost, and I think we were still waiting to hear back from Penticton to hear what they paid for theirs. But again, that's where I got the idea, and I just had to bring it forward now because we're in budget. And again, I'm trying to think ahead of the summer. Instead of bringing it up in midsummer, I just wanted to plan ahead, and that's why it's here today.
I think one of the benefits of having a shade tent, other than what Councillor Trainer already said about, you go under the shade tent, so you're in the shade as you're filling your bottle, helps to keep the water cooler too, is the fact that it's a clearly identifiable place where that unit is sitting, rather than having to search for it. Okay, I see it in the park, I can go there. Councillor Barkwell and then Van Elfen.
Also, perhaps before making a decision here, we could get some information from Penticton about how well used their unit was, where it was located, and how many bottles of water did they fill, etc. To get more information to help us make a better decision.
Okay, before I go to you, Councillor Trainer, I'll just check in with Councillor Van Elfen and then come back to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just curious, maybe Councillor Trainer could help me, where Penticton located theirs. I don't know that.
I remember seeing one downtown. I could be wrong. I just remember seeing one downtown. And I was just going to add, if council wants a bit more time on this, I'm happy to amend my motion to ask staff to give us some more information to find out more about what Penticton's doing before we make a decision.
Is this a follow-up to your question? Okay, and then I'll go to Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, just I'm just, I don't know, just trying to add value to this conversation. We have the Memorial Park band shell washrooms. We have City Hall, which is close to the downtown core. Both, we own them. Like, could we not have our plumber come out of the wall with as Councillor Barkwell so eloquently put it, a tap, but we have the filtration system inside the building, same as maybe at the band shell. We could do the same idea there and identify them as water fill stations, I'm just trying to thinking outside the box and, as a start. And I agree with what you're saying, and then start uptown here, let's say, and then if it's successful and it's not a huge expense, we're looking at a filtration system and a little bit of plumbing. And we could do the same in Lower Town, maybe at the beach or something, at Rotary Park or what have you. But I just want to throw that on the table. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes.
Well, my question was along the same lines. Where downtown would we be able to put this? Where can we tap into the water? Do we know that?
I can, Madam Mayor. Certainly some of the locations identified with the Memorial Park District building here. Other locations would have to be scoped out and defined where easy connection to this could be. If it's this device we're talking about, or if we're talking about installation of a tap, that'd be those key locations. Some also in our parks. I know there's some water connections and things in some of those locations, but it's something that we could provide more detail on.
Used to be a fountain there, so there must be water there somewhere. Councillor Barkle and then Van Alphen.
I say kudos to Councillor Trainer for bringing the conversation forward. I think it's gone off in a direction she didn't expect. And she talked about potentially modifying the motion to have staff investigate all these ideas that have come up. It doesn't look like it's easily modified. So I was just going to suggest that we defeat this motion and put forward a new one that sort of fits the way the discussion has been going about investigating and presenting to council the various options, permanent locations, fountains, misters. Lots of times it would be great to stand under a mister when you're downtown, and I see it as a benefit to our merchants downtown to make it more desirable and attractive to the shoppers would come downtown instead of going into the air-conditioned mall in Penticton.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that too, because I don't think it's necessarily an amendment. But before we do that, I'd like to go to Councillor Van Alphen.
I just want to elaborate on what Councillor Barkle said, and again, kudos to Councillor Trainer. I think this isn't just a district issue. And I think this is a really good conversation, and I think you're going to see business people with business buildings, maybe having a fill station. I mean, I go to the pet store and they have a dish outside for the dog to drink out of, so I can see businesses jumping on board with this because of what you brought forward today. Possibly the banks or something can see the value in this to help, the public. So I think it's a really good thing, and I appreciate you bringing it forward.
I agree. It's easy for us to sit here and, you kind of forget. We all survived it. Some of us had challenges, that's for sure. But some people had significant challenges, even in our own community. So thank you, Councillor Trainer. So if we could vote on the motion that is currently on the floor, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's defeated, but you knew that. And Councillor Trainer, I invite you to bring forward another motion.
Yeah, I want to do so, but I don't want to put a whole bunch of stuff on staff's plate. I just kind of saw this as one solution going forward. I'm going to ask the CAO if there's a way that we can do this without, adding more to your plate.
Through the mayor, thank you, Councillor Trainer. Because of your preparatory vision, we have lots of time to consider this, and we don't have a heat dome that we're dealing with right now. So it wouldn't be too much work for staff if we had the time to do the work. Maybe we could set, some time to come back in maybe May or something, early May with the council would be fine. We could provide some options. I made notes on some of the questions council was seeking. That is fine if we have the time.
Okay. So I'll put forward a motion then that I guess staff come back to council with options for cooling stations, drinking water stations, and anything else that you can come up with that will help our citizens this summer, should we have a heat dome, so that we do have a plan in place, so that when something happens, we have some resources, I guess, to put out to help people cope with it. That was the original intent of my motion.
Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Patton. And Kendra has probably paraphrased that somewhat, but that's okay, that's good. We'll just give her a bit of time. I do have one question, and we've been hearing a lot about how it's hard to procure things right now. What do you, I guess I won't ask that question. In your research, would you be able to, put some thought into determining how long it might take to procure something like this? Because if the decision comes back in May and it's not until September before we can get one, then that doesn't really work. Thank you. Whenever you're ready, Kendra.
So it'll be that council directs staff to research options for water fill and cooling stations to be utilized in the event of a heat dome and to be brought back for council consideration in May 2022.
That sounds okay. I don't know if we need to have the month on it or if that would help staff. That would be good to have the month? Okay, then that's fine. Thank you.
Would you consider changing that to no later than May 2022? The heat dome was in June of last year, and I don't know if a month is long enough to procure.
Do you want to do an amendment to the motion since we do have it on the floor?
Yes.
Okay, and
So we will vote on the amendment to change that to no later than May 2022. Okay, all in favor? None opposed. And now if we can vote, unless there's further discussion. Now we will vote on the amended motion. All in favor? Great. Thank you, Councillor Traynor. Information items, there are just two. The RDOS report submitted by Councillor Holmes and the SILGA January 2022 newsletter. I'd like to speak to something in the newsletter. A couple of things, actually. Is there anyone that wants to bring the RDOS report forward? I'll go with you then first, Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just wondering, in Councillor Holmes's report, I have to put my glasses on for a second. The primary care network report, can you elaborate, like, how does it, Mr. Meadows replied that even though the Ponderosa Clinic was established in Penticton, Summerland was part of the initial planning process. So what does that mean? How does that, what sort of answer is that? Did he elaborate anything on, like, that doesn't seem like any kind of an explanation to me.
No, he didn't elaborate. So I could only speculate.
Perhaps I need to call Mr. Meadows. He phoned me at Christmas time, so it's time for me to return that. Yeah, sorry you don't have an answer to that, Councillor Barkwell. If, there's, he didn't elaborate, he didn't elaborate. Any other thoughts that people wanted to bring forward from the RDOS report? Okay, on the SILGA, I just wanted to point out, oops, wrong attachment. I just wanted to point out the webinar on the BC Watershed Security Fund. That's something that impacts all of local governments in British Columbia, as well as First Nations governments. So it's looking for increased sustainable provincial funding to support and I guess rehabilitate our watersheds to their previous healthy condition. So that's one thing. It's on February the 25th at 3 o'clock. And the link to the webinar is there, link to the invitation. And then just below that, in the little orange square, it talks about a Reach for the Top event at the Salmon Arm Convention, local government versus local government. So I'm not even sure how many people here are attending, but I'm a fairly competitive person. So if anybody wants to form a team, I'd be all over that. Okay, and that's all I wanted to bring forward. We will go on to councillor reports now, and I'm going to start with Councillor Holmes today.
I have no report. I just want to say thank you for mentioning Dick Clements and his passing, and it's very. I was very saddened about it. All I like to say is I remember any time. Any community function or that I went to, and I saw that Dick was there, I thought, oh great, this is going to be a good night. And so I was very saddened when I heard him pass. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to put my question about to Councillor Holmes sort of in context, because it was really about why the Interior Health is considering that Summerland and Penticton are the same, and that there's one primary care network for Summerland and Penticton residents, and that we're expected to go to Penticton, and that it's considered part of our service when we're 20 kilometers away. Is there going to be an opportunity to question Interior Health or anyone involved in these decisions about that kind of philosophy or their position on this?
Well, I'm hoping that when we have the presentation from Interior Health
Yes.
that there will be that opportunity.
All right, thank you.
Do you have a report for, okay. Councillor Traynor?
No report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Elfen?
No report, Madam Mayor.
And Councillor Patton?
I join my fellow colleagues, Madam Mayor. There's no report.
Thank you. Anyone waiting to speak with us?
No, Madam Mayor, but we just skipped over 13.2.
Why do I always do that? Thank you. And I even put a note on here. Make note. I should have circled it. So, committee and commission minutes. For the Community Climate Action Advisory Committee, their meeting of January the 12th. Councillor Barkwell, are you on that committee?
I am, Madam Mayor, and actually that's the meeting where I spoke previously about how I kind of maybe led them astray. I don't know. Maybe it was a good thing, but we kind of got into a discussion as to what their general purpose was. And as I think you said, that they're a very keen group, and they have sort of accomplished first part of their mandate, and maybe it needs to be refreshed, and they're going to see what their particular group might be able to contribute in the climate action area. Yeah.
Good, thank you. So the minutes look Okay, great. Good reflection then. Could I have someone, will you, yeah, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Van Elfen, all in favor? Thank you. Now, oh, I think I'll fall over in a dead faint if you say yes, there is someone on the line. Call for adjournment then. Councillor Traynor and Councillor Patton, all in favor? Great, thank you.